Hello, everyone. This is Professor Zamanek here. So I am going to go through the utilizing and citing sources presentation with you as if we were in class. So I found last semester that a lot of students enjoyed the PowerPoints and the presentations, but what they really missed and wanted was to listen to me talk through it as if we were in class. So I figured I would do that with this presentation. This is definitely something we would do if we were all together in a classroom. So we're going to do it virtually. Yeah, okay, so let's get started. Let's see. Oh yeah, I gotta click the arrow. Okay, here we go. So things we're gonna cover in this presentation. We're gonna look at the quote sandwich, talk about two ways to set up quotes. We'll talk about analysis, which I'm going to argue is the most important part of actually putting quotes in your essay. In-text citations, and we'll spend a few minutes looking at works cited pages. I'm going to go through kind of the general idea there. You take a look at that in more detail. And once we have an essay, we need to focus on the works cited page, or actually just have a works page. I will then come back to this and we can go through it in a little bit more detail. So for now, into the works cited page, again, we're going to just kind of go over it, but not in too much detail. Okay, so part number one, the quote sandwich. There is a picture of a sandwich on your screen. How awesome is that? Thank you, clip art. So the quote sandwich is just such a great way to think about quotes. There's three parts to the quote sandwich, and we can think about the sandwich parts, the top layer of bread, all the awesome stuff in the middle, and then that bottom piece of bread. So let's start with the first little bit, and that is that top piece of bread. That is your quote setup. That's the thing that's going to hold everything together. You really got to have that top piece of bread, and you really need to have a quote setup. Again, in a few moments, we're going to talk about what quote setups are. So as long as you remember that you need them and that they're important, that's perfect. The next thing you need is that middle of the sandwich. That's where all the yummy goodness is. That's where your turkey, your lettuce, your tomato, your mayonnaise, your olives, I don't know, your pickles, all the things I want on a Subway sandwich right now. All those things that you really want to eat in the middle, that's your quote. That's the good thing. That's the thing that you want your readers to see because it brings to your own argument. Again, that's the middle. So top piece of bread, quote sandwich, middle of the sandwich, all the good yummies is the quote. Finally, that bottom piece of bread, that's the analysis of your quote. The bottom piece of bread is super important. Have you ever eaten a sandwich or a hamburger and that like bottom part of the bun or bread somehow disappears before the rest of the like middle does, and you're left with everything kind of just falling apart? Yeah, it happens to me often, and I get really upset because everything just kind of collapses if that bottom piece of bread disappears. That's exactly what happens when people don't analyze their quotes. So you might have a rock solid setup, you might have the coolest quote of all time, but if you don't analyze it as a reader, I can't do anything really with it. I might be able to look at it and guess what you want me to do with it, or come up with things I think I would do with it. But as a writer, you need to help your reader understand how the quote fits your argument. It's your job. So, as lame as it might sound, that bottom piece of bread is so important. Your analysis is so important. Okay. And I think I said this earlier, and I'm sure I'll say it again, but most people skimp on the analysis. Don't do that. Spend some time. You're bringing in someone else's words into your own essay. Give give that some time to marinate in your essay. Give some words to it, okay? So that is the quote sandwich. I hope every time you eat Subway or Quiznos or whatever kind of sandwich you eat, that you be reminded of quotes. That is my goal in life. Alrighty. Part two, ways to set up quotes. The first way is called the tag. It is when you use the author's name. So as you can see, oh, I guess I don't have a little, there's my arrow. You have the author's name, the action word, and then the quote and the citation. So examples, John Smith argues are the best pets, and then the citation. Few things I want to point out before we get to these action words. First thing I want to point out, this comma here, you got to have it. Super important. So right after your action word, use that comma there. The second thing I want to point out is that the punctuation comes after the citation. Punctuation after citation. That could be a really cool rap. Somebody write that. Okay, action words. So as you can see here in the example, it says John Smith argues. Argues is an excellent action word. But if you have a, longer paper, 5, 6, 7, I don't know, 12-page paper, and every single time you bring in a quote, you say argues, your reader's going to get bored and probably, not super thrilled. So spice it up a little bit. There's plenty of action words: states, argues, emphasizes, believes. Um, I I'm so sorry, Mike is interrupting this video. She has a lot of action words apparently, but there's so many of them. So all I'm trying here is don't just pick one and run with it. Try a few, okay? Taglines work really well if the quote's simple and the reader doesn't need a lot of background information. So if you've talked about, let's go John Smith example here. If you've quoted John Smith before or you've mentioned him in the essay, so as a reader, I'm familiar with this, I know kind of who he is, then great. You can just kind of say John Smith argues. But if there's more background needed, maybe the quote's kind of complicated, maybe the quote has some jargon in it that's specific to a certain subject, and I'm going to need to know what that means, then this might not be the best setup for you. But again, if the quote's pretty straightforward and simple, then the tagline works really well. So again, this example is an example of a good tagline because John Smith argues, and then cats are the best pets. I mean, that's just obvious. So, but again, even if you disagree, that's a very straightforward quote. You wouldn't really spend too much time before that explaining it. Okay, colon is our next quote setup. I'm a big fan of the colon when I'm writing my own stuff, my own research, because it gives you a lot of time to kind of help your reader into the quote. So like it says, it is a short, it's explaining. Then we've got that colon, the quote, the citation, and then the period. Okay. So let's get into this a little bit more. So the example, John Smith does not believe dogs are a man's best friend, colon, cats are the best pets. And then a citation in the period. So again, this is kind of a little bit of some background information. Maybe we don't know who John Smith is. Maybe we want to know what in the world his quote's going to be about. That he thinks cats are the best pets. So the colon gives us that space, gives us a little room. Like it says, colon setups work really well if the quote is complicated and if you need some more explanation in order for the reader to understand the context. So when you start working on that final research essay, you're going to be using a lot of different sources and a lot of sources I probably have never read. So it's going to be important you're able to contextualize these quotes. So as a reader, I am able to understand and see how it fits into your argument. So colon is just wonderful for that. All right. Part 3, the analysis. Why do we analyze? What a wonderful question this is. I feel like all English majors are obsessed with analyzing because that's pretty much what we do. But it's just important for people who are English majors or who like books. Analyzation is really important for all kinds of things. We need to be able to analyze any kind of argument and decide if it's true or not true. And you probably analyze a lot more than you think you do. So here's 3 things that might spark your interest to analyze. The first one says it helps readers to understand the text on a deeper level, which is basically what we're going to be trying to do with our articles. We want to look at them, we want to see what they have to say, and then figure out, well, what can we infer from this? The second one gives us greater insight and detail into evidence, sources, and their overall argument. Oh, this is so good. oftentimes it's really important to analyze the things that the author is saying because it informs us about the way in which they've created their argument. So if you have an author, let's go back to our friend John Smith, who's arguing for cats are the best pets, and we notice that all of his pieces of evidence come from one source or sources that are biased away, then that's going to shape his argument for better or worse. Okay, so then we can decide as readers if we think John Smith would be a good person to bring into our own argument. The full reason why we analyze is that it allows us to understand our work in our own context and our own worldview. So, again, about what we were talking about with John Smith um, and his argument about cats being the best pets. Well, maybe you don't care about pets or cats, which would be very you care about cats. You don't. So then you can think about, well, how does it affect my understanding of animals or pets in general? I don't know, but it allows you to start thinking about how these things that seem maybe not valuable to your life or important to your life, how can you help them to be important to your view or my own argument's sake? How to analyze. Alrighty, three things that we can do. The first one, diction and tone. So diction considers the author's word choice. Tone considers the author's attitude. So we choose into either of these, but just remember that diction has to do with word choices. So are you using very casual language? Are you using formal language? Are you using very figurative language? And then tone. Think about tone and attitude. The example I usually give is when you are a teenager, your parents probably told you that you had an attitude. It wasn't necessarily probably what your parents were trying or what you were saying. It was probably the way in which you said it that maybe got you in trouble sometimes. So, tone. This is important in an argument because often I find when people are really passionate about their topic, they tend to be very aggressive and almost condescending to their reader. And that has to do with their tone. So you want to be aware of how you are writing. What is your attitude toward your topic? Okay, just something to keep in mind. And also things to look at when you are looking at other people's essays, articles. The second thing to think about is images and examples. So consider the images and examples that the author provides. How do those speak to you on an emotional or logical level? So, we've all seen those commercials with the little sad animals behind the cages. That speaks to you, I hope, on some sort of emotional level. Every time I see those, I'm ready to go adopt that dog, right? Or that pig in that pig farm. I'm in my car because that brings some sort of emotional response to me. Um, be careful with these things because bees manipulate and get you to believe certain things based on emotion rather than logic and fact. And the third and final way to analyze is thinking about evidence. So, what evidence does the author with their argument? Are they bringing facts? Are they bringing in logic? Are they bringing in just simply emotion based evidence? So, really important to not only think about, well, can I use this article as evidence for my work, but also, well, what evidence is the author bringing in for their own work, and do I want to be tied to that extra evidence? Okay. Final thought on analysis. Be mindful that that analysis is not summary and summary is not analysis. Summary is just a brief overview. I like to think about it as a highlight reel of a sports game. Summary just kind of tells you the overview, but it doesn't really like tell you anything about what your opinion on it. It just says, no, this is what happened. All right. So a lot of times I see people in the analysis part of the quote summarize summarize the article rather than answer it. So analysis is digging into the work rather than just telling me what it is. Okay. So putting it all together, so putting all this quote sandwich stuff together, we're going to look at 1 and 3. I'm going to let you go ahead and read through these on your um, own time when you look at the presentation. But here's a quote setup, a quote, and then an analysis. And these next three slides show you that the different parts are highlighted. So you can see they're using a tagline here. They use the quote, they have a nice citation, and then the punctuation goes after the citation here. And then they have really nice big chunk of analysis. That is one final thing I want to say about analysis. As you can see here, the quote is what, 3 lines? The analysis is more than double that. That's important. So a lot of times people throw gigantic quotes and then say one sentence of analysis. That's not enough. You should have more analysis. So if you're putting in a gigantic block quote that's lines, I hope that analysis is at least 24, right? So you need to have a substantial amount of analysis for the quotes that you put in. Okay, part 4 is in text. So you can paraphrase, correct. But again, like we were saying earlier, you want to make sure you have the punctuation at the end. And then for both paraphrasing direct quotes, you have the last name of the author and the page number. So if we were reading Gladwell, we would say 158. And that is for both paraphrasing and quoting. And then, yes, I say the punctuation goes after parentheses. I clearly make that point. Alrighty. Part 5, the works cited page. All right, like I said at the beginning of this video, I am not going to spend much time on this because not really having a works cited at this point, and I think it would bore you to tears to watch or to listen to go through all these different citations. So I will say a few points on it and then let you kind of look through it. And if you have more questions, please let me know. And as we get closer to having essays with works cited pages, we will of course go through this in more detail. But here's what a cited page looks like. As you can see, we have what's called the hanging indent. So all last names are hanging off, that I have air quotes going on there, hanging off the edge. So it's very clear to see the essay and I see, oh, look at this great article by Anne Floyd. And I turn really quick, excited page, boom, there's Floyd. I can kind of see what this is about. So again, here's the book citation, the analogies, or the anthology, the website citation, the scholarly article or journal citation, which is one you will probably be using of when we especially get to our research paper. If there's more than one author, the first author's name gets flipped backwards, so last name, first name, but then everybody else who's listed gets their normal pattern for their name. So first, last, first, last. The first person who's written on a scholarly article is usually the person who has the, I guess, most experience, the most important person, okay? And then things to remember. The dates are listed as follows. So we always do day, month, year. Again, that hanging indent, that first line, that last name should be hanging off the edge. How to do that, I'm always here to help with that. Entries must be alphabetical no matter where they appear in your essay. So for example, my last name starts with a Z, but if you were to quote me in your first paragraph, you would still put me probably at the end. I don't know how many Z sources you're going to have, but you would probably put me at the end or towards the end. So Manek, Erica. And my last name again would be hanging off. You double space. If there's no author, you use the title of the article, the essay, the book, whatever your source is. And here comes this last little bit. You can use Easy and other narrators to start citations, but I would always double check your work. It's so obvious when people just use EasyBib and nothing else because things are weird and strange and I can just see it immediately. So again, I'm against using it. It's a place to start if you just are really unsure, but I would absolutely go back and double check things. And I think, oh, that is it. Well, excellent. If you have more questions, please let me know.